Hello and welcome everyone to another Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update. Today, the 1st of May 2015. The 1st of May. This is an update that's outside of the cyclone season. But guess what? We've got Tropical Cyclone Quang has made landfall, or at least the convective activity of Cyclone Quang has made landfall. The actual center of circulation is a little bit offshore. We'll talk about that shortly because that's all a big schmozzle at the moment. Over the eastern parts of the continent, we've got an east coast low developing, creating some very, very heavy rainfall and some flash flooding over southeast Queensland. So we'll talk a bit about both, but our main topic of conversation obviously is Quang, because our residents in WA want to know what the hell is going on with this thing. It is a very strange cyclone, and they all tend to be very strange when they get sheared away. Firstly, let me tell you, we were spot on. The system is not expected to make landfall as a cyclone, and we've been saying that now for a while. We were saying marginal Cat 1 or low. At this stage, it looks like it's going to cross the coast as a low. But that, as we said yesterday and the day before, does not mean that people weren't going to experience conditions that would resemble a Category 1 cyclone. And I do believe we said the words winds up to 120 kilometres an hour could be expected. It's exactly what we've seen. Alrighty, so the latest Bureau of Meteorology update at 2:54 p.m., which is only a few minutes ago as of this video, the system is a Category 1. It's still located offshore on the Bureau's track map. The actual meaty convection, all that really heavy weather has already hit the coast, weakened, and is now inland. The actual center of circulation lies offshore. I very much doubt that this is any longer a cyclone or anything that even closely resembles a cyclone, but the Bureau have maintained it, just I think more as a precaution to make sure people do understand that we are still seeing some fairly heavy weather associated with it, but by strict meteorological definition, I would very much doubt that this is a cyclone any longer. Now, that's not to say that Exmouth and indeed Onslow and Barrow Island didn't cop some pretty wild weather. Now, the weather that these places copped was the equivalent of what would have been a Category 1 impacted cyclone. And what we saw, particularly around lunchtime, we had this really strong bit of convection push right over the top of Exmouth and Learmonth, and that's where the Bureau of Meteorology went offline a little bit there. We had a wind gust up to about 120 kilometres an hour, but I think that we're going to have to wait until manual readings are taken, or the actual Haynes anemometer is actually manually read before we can figure out exactly what the worst that Learmonth copped was. But it looked like the system went offline just as the worst was hitting it. And so you can see here suddenly the rainfall total just vanishes just around about the time of the strongest convection. So as I mentioned, the actual cyclone center is probably still located offshore. It is absolutely no weather associated with it. It isn't a cyclone, let's be honest. It no longer is, and probably hasn't been for a few hours now. But I think in order for people to be alerted, they needed to remain and keep naming this a cyclone, just because it's important that the hourly updates or 3-hourly updates were issued for residents in this area. And I think the right thing was done. I think the right call was made. But in terms of meteorologically, this system is no longer a cyclone, definitely not. Now, in saying that, we still have some mean wind gusts occurring out here across Onslow. At the moment, we've got winds gusting up to about 70 kilometres an hour, so Onslow being a couple of hundred k's to the east, and they're seeing winds coming in straight off the Indian Ocean, as I mentioned, around about 40 to 60 kilometres an hour, gusting to about 60 to 80 kilometres an hour. So certainly some very strong winds still associated with this system. And not only that, but those northerly winds are bringing in a lot of moisture and a lot of rainfall. So fantastic to see the rainfall over the West Pilbara. It's being shared around. And that's what we said, that if the system was going to hit as a tight symmetrical tropical cyclone, that the rainfall would be very centralised and focused. But because the system's been sheared away so much, we're seeing a fairly widespread rainfall across the West Pilbara and the Gascoyne. The power of vertical wind shear. Nothing can explain it and describe it more than the set of satellite images that we're just seeing here in the past 24 hours. We had a Category 4 cyclone yesterday, and a lot of people were a little bit worried that this wind shear wouldn't happen. It was pretty obvious that it was going to happen. It was just a matter of would it happen in time for it to weaken out, and the answer to that was yes and no. So officially the system center will probably cross the coast as a low, but technically the fact is that these places in this northwest coast did receive Category 1 system strength weather. But isn't it just amazing that we have a Category 4 cyclone, and because of vertical shear, the system moves, 500, 600 kilometers in a very short space of time. And what we also then see is that the system just completely weakens out into nothing in such a short space of time. It is just a wonder of the weather to see this sort of thing happen. One of nature's most powerful beasts humbled in a matter of hours. Looking at the satellite imagery, the visible imagery shows that the low-level circulation center is in fact offshore still, just here to the northwest of Exmouth. And so what we have seen here is the convective activity, which has pushed a long way further southeast, but the actual low-level circulation center probably lies somewhere here near the northwest Cape still, so it still hasn't crossed the coast. But there's, as the Bureau of Meteorology say in their latest cyclone bulletin, there is a very low confidence in the actual location of that center because there's just no weather associated with it. There's nothing associated with it. And this is what I mean. The system is no longer a cyclone by any stretch of the imagination. But once again, the actual experience of residents on the ground suggests that it is the equivalent of a Category 1 cyclone in terms of what they experienced. What killed it? This killed it. Vertical wind shear. We had wind shear values of 40 knots as the system approaches landfall. Now, as you know from watching these updates, you know that anything more than about 20 knots is cyclone suicide, and what we had here is the system tracking through 30 knots early this morning and overnight and into early this morning, and that wind shear just kept increasing and increasing and increasing, and that we, in the situation here a few hours before landfall, the system encountered 40 knots of shear. So absolutely no doubt that the system was going to weaken, and really there wasn't much doubt as to whether it would be any stronger than a very weak Category 1 at landfall. So just the close-up there of the visible imagery, and we can probably make out what looks like a low-level circulation center maybe just here right now. And we can see that once again there's very little weather associated with this particular system anywhere north and west of the circulation. It's all south and east of the circulation, and that's what I mean. It's giving a lot of good rain out here to Onslow. It's giving a lot of good rain further out towards Karratha as well. Pretty amazing looking cyclone, isn't it? It pushed out here and then just very rapidly pushed southeast. Got up to Category 4 as we know, and then started to weaken rapidly from this morning to Cat 3, Cat 2, and then by the time it got anywhere near land, it was a Cat 1. So there will still be maybe some blustery winds there overnight tonight. Winds at the surface here, particularly on that southeastern quadrant, could be approximating gale force, maybe even storm force in very isolated pockets. That was as of 5 p.m, so that's about the time that you're getting this update. But as we go to this evening, we can see there are still some gales possible here at the surface from the system, and then by 1 a.m. or 11 p.m. WA time, the system is now located over land and weakening very rapidly. In terms of the rainfall associated with the system, well, we've seen pretty well what we're going to see over the Northwest Cape region. Once the system is located over land overnight tonight, we might still see some shower activity out here to the north. Don't be surprised if the winds do get up again, but they're not going to get up anywhere near the level that they might have been earlier on today. And we'll still continue to see some shower activity here across Karratha, getting east towards Port Hedland, and we'll see that activity move further to the east overnight tonight and into early tomorrow. You can see some moderate to heavy falls coming in off this northerly stream. These falls are in inches, by the way, over 3 hours, over a 3-hour period. Then you can see as we go into about lunchtime tomorrow, we've got a situation where we still have that shower activity, but probably not as strong coming in on the coast. The strongest of the activity seems to be just inland of the coast, where we have some heat from the land, enhancing the uplift of that moist air. Now, as we go into tomorrow evening, once again, we see the possibility of some moderate falls between Port Hedland and Karratha. And then finally, we start to see a decrease in that as we go into Sunday, and you can see here that the echoes become a lot lighter. Still the possibility of some afternoon shower and storm activity to being enhanced by that northerly airflow, though. It is very moist, and so as soon as we do get a little bit of uplift on the land, that moist, warm air coming in off the ocean will be certainly primed for shower and storm development. But in terms of cyclonic effects, really, folks, what you've had is pretty well what you're going to have. There's very little to come from this system. As I said, there is a chance here that we'll see a continuation of gales in that area between Exmouth and Onslow, but after around about midnight tonight, that should all have eased. Alright, so thank goodness we didn't chase that, otherwise we'd have been very, very disappointed. Okay, over to the east. All sorts of crazy stuff happening out here over southeastern Queensland. We've had rainfall since 9 a.m. today of up to 230 millimetres. Yep, that's not a typo. That's 230 millimetres. There are isolated pockets of even more than that. So very, very intense rainfall activity occurring along that trough line. Not unexpected. I hope no one's saying that they weren't warned. We knew this was coming a week ago. Everyone knew this was coming a week ago. So I'm assuming that all of southeast Queenslanders knew it as well, or anyone who has any idea about the weather or any interest in the weather should have known that this was coming. And look, folks, ideally, I guess the actual rainfall amounts are a little bit higher than we expected, but in terms of timing, it all seems to be going to plan. Just the rainfall totals, perhaps 50 or so millimetres, a bit more than we were anticipating. We were anticipating 150 to 200 millimetres through the day, but to see 230 already, that's a little bit more than what we were expecting. Looking at that activity in a little bit more detail here, we've got a situation where the Sunshine Coast has been the recipient of most of that heavy stuff. Now that heavy stuff is starting to drift further and further south, so it's probably going to be impacting Brisbane, or is impacting Brisbane right now, and then will continue to move south in towards the Gold Coast as the afternoon and evening progresses, and into tonight and overnight tonight we'll get a lot of rainfall over northeast New South Wales. Well, that's the plan anyway, and everything so far has gone to plan, so there's nothing to suggest that we should expect anything different from this weather system than what has already been forecast. So you can see the computer model here from the Euro being spot on, predicting that strongest rainfall activity to be around Brisbane at around about 4 p.m. and continuing to be around Brisbane into about 7 p.m. and then heading further south onto the Gold Coast around 7 p.m. as well. As we go to 10 p.m. we can see once again the heaviest activity between Brisbane and the border. Also, we've got some heavy activity over southern inland Queensland as well. As we go into tomorrow morning at 4 a.m, we can see, 1 a.m, we can see that all of that activity is now on the Gold Coast. Brisbane starts to see a clearance, and that's what I said yesterday to a lot of our viewers, that this activity wouldn't last long. Yes, it would be very intense, but it wouldn't last an overly long time. So that's a little bit of a break there because of that. Okay, as we go to 4 a.m, we can see Gold Coast southwards now into northeast New South Wales is the peak of the weather, and then that will continue through 7 a.m. It's now pretty well cleared the entire state of Queensland, except for southern inland parts here and the border ranges. As we go into Saturday, 10 a.m, you can see some very heavy rain across northeast New South Wales. Maybe some shower activity developing again, some very light shower activity developing again across southern inland Queensland tomorrow afternoon and evening. Convectively, there is a chance there of some activity, but it won't be severe, it won't be strong, it won't be heavy rainfall associated with it. There might be, depending on how cold the upper levels get, there might be some hail if we can get a little bit of uplift there, especially on the ranges. But in terms of rainfall activity, I wouldn't anticipate too much from those convective systems tomorrow. After that, the whole of Queensland gets into clear skies, and we anticipate that this will be the last video update for season 2014-2015. Thanks for watching this video update, folks, and we hope you've enjoyed the coverage of season 2014-2015 that we've brought you. And for now, I don't anticipate talking to you on video until November 1, unless you're a subscriber. If you're a subscriber, we'll continue to give you updates on the Global Cyclones video blog about cyclones that happen all around the world over the next 6 months. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk again on November.